Welcome to Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks, and joined as always by Mr. Stephen Hackett. How you doing, Stephen?
Not always. I was just on vacation, but hello.
I guess. I was going to try and just gloss over that you were not here last week. Rosemary and I, though, we had like an Automators reunion. We talked about shortcuts. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great. I'm about 2/3 of the way through and really good. So thank you to Rosemary for filling in.
She's a lot of fun. Well, either way, happy to have you back, and also back to the show. Welcome back to the show, Federico Viticci.
Hi, it's good to be back. It's been a while. Thanks for having me on again.
Every time I say your name, I'm tempted to Italianize it, and then I realize that
that was good.
Southern California guy is just not going to do a very good job of that.
That was good. That was good.
Oh,
I've heard much worse over the years.
Okay.
So yeah. You've done a great job.
All right. Well, I'll take that.
I've said this before. I've said it to Federico before, but when my mom references you, she says Federico.
Oh, wasn't I Rodrigo at some point for
Probably.
your mom?
It's just been a lot of different things. But yes, you're here. It's weird talking to you without Mike because you and I do a podcast together each week. But
it's almost like we're cheating on him together with David.
Well, we all know I'm better looking, so that's okay.
Sure.
So we're gonna get into a bunch of stuff with Federico today, and on More Power Users, which is the extra segment at the end of the show for our members, we're going to talk to Federico about his Notion usage. A lot of really interesting stuff there. Of course, we moved Mac Power Users into Notion about 2 years ago. Been, I think, very happy with that. So we're going to hear what Federico's up to there. But first, we should catch up a little bit. It's been a minute since you've been on the show. I'm sure people know who you are, but you are the editor-in-chief of MacStories.net, which is a total media empire now. You've got the podcast, you've got the club, you've got 3 podcasts, 4, 5, 7.
I'm on 4 of them. I mean, one of them is on Relay. So I have 3 on MacStories, and I think we are at a total of 5 shows on MacStories right now.
Unbelievable.
And I'm on 3 of them myself, plus connected with you and Mike.
That's right.
A man without a single unpublished thought at that point, right?
That is true. That is actually a problem. Yes. I wish I had a little more space for myself. Yes. Yeah.
So I want to just briefly touch on some of the background of MacStories. I know you've told this story. I'm not sure you've told it here, but how did you end up writing and talking about Apple and its sort of surrounding technologies?
Gosh, that's a long time ago. So it all started. I dropped out of college after just 3 months. I wanted to be a philosophy professor. Bad idea, really bad idea. And I didn't want to continue my studies. And so my mom told me, well, if you don't want to study, you're going to have to find yourself a job, which I did. And that was in 2008. And at the time, I don't know if you guys remember the movie with Steve Carell, the 40-year-old virgin.
Yeah.
But in the movie, he was working at like an eBay store, in the sense that it was like a place where people would bring you things that they wanted to sell online on eBay, but they didn't have the time or patience or like computer knowledge to do so. That was my first job. I worked in a store in my hometown of Viterbo, Italy, where people would bring us stuff to put on their behalf on eBay, and we would take out a commission out of that. So that was my job for like a year, and that allowed me to save some money. It was a pretty good job. I mean, I had fun. I got to use a lot of different computers to and taking pictures and all of that. And obviously we would have our own eBay account. And that eBay account was used for obviously selling people stuff. But also my boss at the time, he was using that eBay account quite liberally to purchase his own things. And I remember one day he came up to me and said, well, Federico, I ordered 2 iPhones from the United States. And I was kind of vaguely familiar with Apple at the time. My only device was an iPod. I had an iPod Classic, like a 5th generation iPod Classic, I think. And he was like, "But I didn't know. But I don't know how to use these things. Can you figure out how to use this iPhone for me?" And that was my first exposure to the iPhone. Actually, trying to figure out how to unlock the iPhone in Italy for my boss. And at the time, obviously phones were not region free, so you had to do the whole like installer thing and make sure that it would work on an Italian SIM network. Like that was fun, and I remember just thinking, oh, this device is so cool and it's so much better than my iPod Classic. And it was sort of that exposure to that device for just a couple of days that allowed me to sort of develop this very sudden and quite obsessive, really interested in Apple. And so I decided I was going to save some money each month to buy myself a MacBook Pro. Because I had like a Windows PC at home, and I really was not the kind of nerd that I am today. Like I was super into video games, I always have been, but I was not really a computer nerd at all. And I had a Nokia phone. Obviously, tablets were not a thing, and I had an iPod Classic, and that was it. But using that iPhone for my boss to set it up for him, it let me see that like software and hardware could be, I don't know, something really fun to tinker with. And so a few months later, I got myself a MacBook Pro, and I felt like I needed to learn everything about it, right? So I started hanging out in these Italian online forums, and I got really into those forums. Like I really got into having conversations with people there. And I remember just staying up late at night, just talking to random people on those forums about Apple news, Apple rumors, future iPhone models, the best apps for macOS. I remember customizing the UI of macOS, going to other forums like Mac Themes, that used to be like this incredible place at the time where you could install and find all kinds of skins for the Aqua interface. And so I was spending so much time just talking to random people for free that at some point my girlfriend, she told me, well, if you spend so much time just writing on someone else's forums, like why don't you just open your own blog? And that's what I did, and I launched a first version of MacStories on the free like WordPress thing, and I was blogging like every day, and I did that for like a month, and then I realized, well, maybe it's better if I actually own my domain. And that's when I purchased MacStories.net, and I started there. And initially, the website was in 2 languages. I was doing both Italian and a terrible English at the time. And then a few months later, I decided, well, nobody nearly cares about me. And I want to be. I remember thinking, I want to be famous. I was hungry. I was 19,
Sure.
and I thought, well, I want this website to be popular. And so I thought, I'm just going to do it in English. And that was in the fall. I started in April of 2009, and I continued with 2 languages up until September or October. And then I just went with English. And that's how it began.
Well, I've always felt like your English is pretty good. I guess as it got better over the years, I mean, you do so much podcasting and writing in English now.
Oh, thank you. I mean, now I'm at the point where I am kind of struggling with Italian personally.
No,
just because
no.
I talk in English with my colleagues, 4 podcasts every single week, and I write in English, and essentially, and I work from home, so it's not like I see a lot of people on a daily basis. So I'm actually struggling with remembering words and expressions in Italian, and this don't mean to sound like a brag at all. It's actually like quite a problem for me lately. So,
do you think in English or
sometimes
Italian?
I do. Yeah.
Oh boy! Wow, you
Yeah. Crossed whatever threshold there is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look. The fact is, your writing is stellar. I mean, it's sometimes I read an article you write, and it's just shocking to me that English is your second language. And I try to imagine myself trying to write anything in another language. And I just have so much respect for how much you've grown your writing abilities over the years, Federico.
And that's way too kind of you, but thank you. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Not many people can write that well in a second language.
Yeah. One thing I think a lot of people will know MacStories for are y'all's long form reviews of Apple's operating system updates. So typically you write iOS and iPadOS. John Voorhees will cover the Mac. You've got other people who have done Watch and TV and other things over the years. How did you end up in a position that you wanted to review iOS? And I mean, it's a big project. Like, I know being friends and working on Connected together that you spend a lot of time on this. I'd love to hear some of the behind the scenes and kind of what goes into that.
Yeah, it kind of started because I saw an opening to do the kind of thing that John Syracuse used to do for macOS. And I thought to myself, I want to be that guy, but for iOS. And eventually became iOS and iPadOS because the two operating systems were split into two releases. And it was as simple as that, really, realizing now fewer and fewer people are doing long form reviews. And I like doing a long form piece. And I knew I actually did macOS for a couple of years toward the beginning of my career, and then I realized, well, I just want to specialize, and also I was having more fun on iOS, on the iPhone and the iPad, and so I thought, well, I want to be that guy. Like I want to create a similar tradition in our little community, and little did I know that that decision would fundamentally change the course of my life and the course of my summer every year. And to be honest with you, like there have been times where I thought to myself, boy, what have I done here? Like why did I decide to give myself this kind of responsibility every single year, right? Especially because it's especially disruptive in the summer. And if you live in Italy, where the summer is sort of like this sacred time, you know, where, I mean, the stereotypes are all true. Nobody essentially works in Italy during the month of August, which is a problem for me, right? Because the month August is right before the September craze of iPhone announcements and OS releases. And so there's been an ebb and flow to the review. I started with these massive pieces, like 70,000 words at some point for iOS 11, I believe. And my style has sort of, you know, I think I've landed over the past couple of years on a particular style of the review where I've sort of accepted that I cannot possibly cover every single little detail in iOS, especially because these operating systems are so different, whether you live in the United States or you live in Europe. And there's some features, for example, that I cannot access because I don't live in America, right? And it's impossible. It's a sprawling operating system, especially iOS. And over the past couple of years, I've realized, well, I shouldn't have to, like, this article is not supposed to be a manual. It's supposed to be my review of the things I care about. And I try to be as detailed as possible, obviously. But rather, I think I've sort of changed my approach and my style, especially over the past couple of years, trying to do something more approachable, still detailed, but with a slightly, I don't want to say less technical tone, but something that reads and sounds a little bit friendlier, a little less intimidating, you know? And that allowed me to also considerably speed up the process of working on the review, because the way that it works is essentially I take notes for 2 months, 2.5 months. I take notes. I try to use the thing, absorb as much information almost organically as much as I can. And then I write the review in less than 2 weeks. That's how it all happens toward the end of August or the beginning of September. That's how it's been for the past couple of years. And hopefully it'll be the same this year. So we'll see.
There's an old phrase. Someone asked Abe Lincoln, how would you chop down a tree? And he said he'd spend the first 45 minutes sharpening his axe and the last 15 chopping the tree down.
Yeah.
That's really true for these types of projects, isn't it?
Yeah, that's I was not familiar with that, but that's essentially what it feels like for me, because I want to get to a place every year where when I sit down to write, I know exactly what I'm going to write, and I know exactly what kind of opinion I'm going to have about something. And it changes every year, obviously, especially in a year like this where there's not a redesign, but some, a new design material and some bigger design changes this year, obviously compared to the previous years. And when you have that kind of release, it's always best to wait for, I don't want to say the last minute, but you don't want to write something in late June or early July and regret it later. And I say that because it happened to me. Like, I've seen it all over the years. Like, remember, I was around for iOS 15 when Apple changed Safari in the middle of August, right? And I essentially threw away an entire chapter that I had written. So I've tried to refine my process over the years, and this year will be my 11th review. I started with iOS 9. So I started 10 years ago, and this will be the 11th review. Started with iOS 9, and I've always done them always have done them on the iPad. Almost entirely written and researched and sort of created on the iPad. And yeah, this will be, with the 26th release, will be the 11th one that I've done, which is, I try not to think about it too much because I've always kind of struggled with that sense of responsibility. Like, people expect a review to be out. But I guess what matters is that I still have fun doing these things. And every year I try to put a slightly different spin on it. I'm still not sure what the spin is going to be this year, but I'm sure it'll come to me because it always does.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by our friends at 1Password. You may be using 1Password at work, but you can also use it at home with 1Password for families. We use it in the Hackett household as our personal password manager. So my wife and I can share logins to shared accounts, stuff for the kids. We can also have our own vault. She doesn't need to necessarily see or have access to everything, all my stuff cluttering up her stuff. A great feature of 1Password, either for business or families, is Watchtower. You can use Watchtower to find out if your items are affected by breaches, have weak passwords, or maybe they support two-factor authentication or passkeys and you haven't set it up yet. Watchtower can even prompt you to say, hey, look, this seems like a work thing. You have it in your personal vault. Maybe you want to move it. It's really cool. Watchtower is available on the Mac, iOS, Windows, Android, and Linux versions of 1Password. It is really awesome. Security compromises happen all the time, and I'm not keeping up with them, but 1Password will warn me. If I visit a login that looks vulnerable or has been compromised, it will tell me about it. It is really great. You can learn more about that on 1Password's website. If you want to sign up for a free trial and check out 1Password, go to onepassword.com/MPU. You can learn more and get a free 30-day trial. And when you sign up, you'll get 20% off for being a listener of this podcast. So once again, that's onepassword.com/MPU.
All right, Federico, we booked you on the show because there has been a trend in the Mac Power users lately where we've got all these iPad Power users that are switching back, and we thought, well, I feel like Federico is going to be the next tree to fall. And so we booked you on the show, and then iOS 26 showed up. So I have no idea. Federico, what hardware are you using these days?
Yes, I'm using all the hardware. So it's funny because I was also part of that wave of folks, especially for the first half of 2025. I got myself a 14-inch MacBook Pro because I was fed up with the state of the iPad and with the slow progress of iPadOS, and I essentially went to WWDC as a Mac user. And Stephen booked me months before, saying, "Oh, we're gonna talk about macOS and your grand return to Macland." And then, of course, iPadOS 26 happened, and that fundamentally changed my approach. And I've been thinking about this for the past month or so. And so I would say that primarily right now, I'm back on the iPad Pro, but I still do all of my shows on the on the Mac Studio. You may be wondering, wait, what, a Mac Studio? That is not mine. This is a review unit from Apple. This is a loan from Apple PR for evaluation and review purposes. So this is not my computer, and they wanted me to try a proper M3 Ultra Mac Studio with 512 gigabytes of RAM, 8 terabytes of storage, all the things. And this one I set up at my desk. And I've been using it as a desktop for the past couple of months, and I've been writing some articles about it. And I'm sure the experiments will continue until my loan is up. So I record at this computer at the Mac Studio 4 times a week. I have tried, and I know that I could do the job on the iPad Pro. The way I've set up my desk and the accessories that I use, I've created the sort of environment, the sort of home office where the computer that I use is interchangeable. At any moment, I can choose to use the Mac Studio or my iPad Pro or the MacBook Pro. And it doesn't really matter which computer I use because all the apps and all the accessories, everything works the same way. I am not fully embracing iPadOS 26 yet because it can be a little buggy. And I want to make sure that for production work, for the podcasts and especially for the video that I do on some of those podcasts, I want to make sure that everything works. And so this Mac Studio is still on Sequoia, whereas my personal MacBook Pro is on Tahoe. And I just want to make sure that if and when the time comes that I realize, well, I'm just going to do everything on the iPad Pro, I want to make sure that the software is going to be stable. But I would say that primarily iPadOS 26 is pushing me back again onto the iPad, but maybe not to 100%. Because the things that I've been feeling over the past month obviously started with a lot of enthusiasm, and I still have a lot of enthusiasm for iPadOS 26 and the multitasking and the windowing. But what iPadOS 26 doesn't change, I think, is the fact that there's fundamentally a lack of exciting third-party software on iPadOS right now. And that's been the case for the past few years, really. I wrote this article a few months ago called The iPad's Sweet Solution, which was obviously a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing, arguing that the best apps that I use on the iPad are not native iPad apps from the App Store anymore. They're web apps saved to my home screen. And the idea was that usually, all things being equal, if, say, my Task Manager Todoist as an iPad app from the App Store, but also as a web app that I can use in Safari or that I can save from Safari to my home screen, usually the web version is more fully featured than the iPad one. And that to me feels like a contradictory thing, right? Why would the web version be better than a native version that in theory should be highly optimized for things like keyboard shortcuts or widgets, all those things. But the thing is, developers are just not optimizing for iPadOS specific user interfaces anymore. And so even though we have much better windowing and multitasking now, and there's a menu bar, and there's local capture for people like me that need to do a podcast, like you have all of these quality of life improvements. Files is so much better. But that doesn't fundamentally change the fact that when I open my iPad Pro and when I open my MacBook Pro, on the MacBook Pro, I got so much choice in terms of software, third-party software, and features in those third-party apps that I just don't get on the iPad. And so Apple can change and improve the operating system, but unless you only use Apple apps, right, you still have that pretty big asterisk saying, yes, but on macOS, you get much, much more freedom and options for when it comes to third-party software.
Well, especially for an automator like you, like I always equated what you do, like automating on the iPad is like a runner who trains up in the mountains where there's no oxygen, and then you come down the mountain on a Mac and there are so many options for automation and things you can do that are just not available on the iPad. I would assume that you're going to miss some of that if you go 100% iPad.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've noticed, right, over the past few months, especially when you consider the the fact that you have a terminal, for example, on macOS, and that, especially over the past few months, as I've gotten more and more into testing large language models and testing, LLMs, having a terminal gives you so many more options when it comes to using those large language models on macOS, and also integrating those with shortcuts. It's almost as if the kind of automation that you have in shortcuts on the Mac, when you consider the terminal, when you consider the multitasking actions, is like a completely different kind of automation compared to what you can do on the iPad, right? And so automating on the iPad, I mean, I still do it. I still love the fact that I can create my own shortcuts, and I'm having a lot of fun actually with Apple Intelligence in shortcuts this year. But that doesn't change the fact that it still kind of feels like you're trying to do this with one hand tied behind your back,
Yeah.
Whereas when you do that on the Mac, you're like, oh, okay, great. Now I can use shortcuts. I can use the terminal. I got Keyboard Maestro. I got Better Touch Tool. I got all of these tools. I can go nuts with these things, and that's just not possible on the iPad.
Now, before we move on, though, I don't want to get past this Mac Studio. I don't know that we've ever had anybody on the show that's got a 512 gigabytes of RAM and like a fully loaded M3 Ultra. But I know we have listeners who are always curious, like, what kind of performance are you getting from a fully loaded Ultra? And like, for normal folk out there, is there any benefit to this thing, or is this a thing where you only see it when you roll your own LLM or do something crazy?
Yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, if you're looking at an M3 Ultra for gaming purposes, I would actually consider an M4 Max rather, especially like if you want to try the new Cyberpunk on macOS, you should just try it on an M4 Max. I think the M3 Ultra and this kind of computer is the kind of computer that should only be used by highly specialized folks, especially when it comes to running AI locally, right? Because these LLMs are so memory hungry. They're always starving for more memory. And this is the kind of computer that you get, essentially, if you want to do stuff like running the full-blown DeepSeek, which is a 700 gigabyte model locally, entirely on your computer, which I can do with pretty respectable performance, actually. Like you can load that up in memory, and it's gonna work, and it's gonna give you up to 30, 40 tokens per second, like totally respectable performance for a full-blown state-of-the-art open source model that you can put on your computer. You can disconnect from Wi-Fi if you want to. You can just run that thing on your computer entirely locally offline, or like. And again, I go back to the idea of this is the kind of computer that if you're doing, advanced mathematics, or you're an academic and you need to run complex calculations and you need to run maybe even a couple of local LLMs on the side, because that's the other benefit of this computer, where you can just load things into memory, right? Even if they're not like the full-blown DeepSeek R1, but if you just want to load multiple smaller models locally, it's something that I do, for example, is I have Olama installed on the Mac Studio, which is a client for downloading and using local, offline, open source, or rather open weights, large language models. And so what I do is I have a couple of versions of Gemma by Google, which is the sort of kind of similar to Gemini, but open source. I have Gemma 3, for example, in a couple of different variations, like the 27 billion parameter or the 12 billion parameter, to run some comparisons from shortcuts, right? Because I have shortcuts that try and do some text processing using Gemma. But at the same time, I can have, for example, Qwen, which is the LLM from Alibaba, the Chinese company, and they have multiple flavors of Qwen. They have a Qwen model, which is just text and reasoning, but they also have the Qwen VL, which is a vision large language model that would be Qwen 2.5 VL, and that I've been using again locally, totally locally and offline in shortcuts to roll my own advanced scanner for scanning photos and scanning PDFs, for example, and running comparisons between them. So that's the kind of thing that I've done. I am not a developer of large language models, but I know that this computer, for example, is used by people who want to fine-tune a model offline for their own usage, or it is used by people who want to take an open source model from Hugging Face, for example, or from these other open source web portals where you can download a model and you can convert using Python. You can convert that model to MLX. MLX is the format that is essentially an Apple format that optimizes offline large language models for Apple Silicon. So there's people who download, I don't know, the latest version of Qwen 2.5 and leave it running on an M3 Ultra Max Studio to spit out at the end an MLX version of that LLM. So, but I am not that kind of person. I just like to, Apple just approached me and they said, hey, we saw what you're doing with AI locally on your MacBook Pro. Would you like to have even more performance? And I was like, sure. And you have these different use cases where you can just either say, okay, I am gonna try and benchmark DeepSeek R1 running locally on this Mac Studio, or you can just say, well, I got the RAM. I'm gonna load up a bunch of things, and I'm gonna try multiple versions of my shortcuts using different LLMs, and they're all gonna be open in memory, and it's not gonna slow me down because I got half a terabyte of memory.
Yeah, exactly. Now, except for LLM work, is there anything else where you notice a substantive difference between the M3 and the MacBook Pro?
I mean, it's super quiet. Whereas
Sure.
with the MacBook Pro, after even with what do I have, like 96 gigs of RAM?
Wow.
When I'm working on Mac OS, I am the complete opposite as on the iPad. Like, I try to leave everything open. Like, I can never be bothered to quit stuff. And so after a while, I can hear the fans, and I realize, oh, I got way too many things open in the dock. I got way too many tabs open in my browser, and especially with all of these Electron apps that I'm using, I can feel that it's getting warm, and I can feel the fans. Whereas this Mac Studio, the one time I heard the fans, and they were not even that loud, to be honest, was when I loaded DeepSeek R1 in memory. Yeah. That was the one time. Otherwise, I would say they're both great computers, actually. The Mac Studio, obviously, as a desktop, you never worry about battery life. You never worry about anything, especially with this Mac Studio. With the MacBook Pro, even though it's an M4 Pro with a lot of RAM, you still need to have that little bit of management, like there's a battery, and so you gotta be conscious of that. The screen is smaller. I don't have a 27-inch monitor in front of me, and the RAM is limited. So yeah, that's that. But otherwise, like it's not a slow computer. It doesn't give you that ultimate sort of peace of mind as an M3 Ultra Max Studio. Yeah, it's gonna be sad when I have to send this back, but and I'm not gonna buy one myself because it's totally overkill.
I was getting ready to ask, do you see yourself wanting this moving forward?
No, especially when you consider the dollar to euro exchange.
Oh, yeah,
like I'm not gonna spend 16,000 euros on. Yeah, not gonna do it.
Yeah, the only thing, because I have an M2 Studio, and I got to the very cliff of trading it in this year, but stepped away. The only time I've ever hit a point where it just wasn't very good was I tried that new game that came out a few months ago, the Assassin's Creed, where it was like open world Japan. Yeah, and it was unplayable on my M2 Mac Studio. It was just like a frame a second or something, and it was kind of surprising to me because this isn't that old of hardware. So I think if you like gaming, you got to stay up with the new hardware. But otherwise, for most uses, the Apple Silicon will last you a long time.
So you're bouncing between Macs, iPads, these other things. What are some of the software that you use to kind of glue all this stuff together?
Okay, yeah, that's that's an interesting question. So obviously, from a software perspective, on Mac OS, when I have to record podcasts, it's a completely different setup than on the iPad. On the iPad, I for the longest time, I couldn't record audio and video the way I wanted. Now I have local capture in iPadOS 26, but on macOS, I can use Audio Hijack and OBS for the audio and video respectively, and that's great. I would say that in terms of the glue that sort of makes the experience, makes switching between multiple devices as smooth as possible, I would say that I try to keep things consistent as much as I can, and I try to I think obviously shortcuts is one of them, right? I have a lot of shortcuts, and I have a lot of like all the shortcuts that I've built over the years that are consistent and work across Mac and iPad. So they don't really take advantage of anything that is exclusive to Mac OS, but they work on the iPad. I got my shortcuts for uploading images, for publishing articles to WordPress, for clipping things that I find on the web. So I have built my collection of core shortcuts, and that's actually a folder that I have in the Shortcuts app. And those shortcuts are going to work everywhere. So no matter the computer, they work even on the phone. Like I got those shortcuts as the sort of first layer of the glue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think increasingly over the past year, two more things have happened. The first one is I have progressively embraced more and more web services instead of native Apple apps. And I do check in every once in a while. I mean, I did it for the past month. I checked in again on Apple Notes and reminders. But I prefer the sort of the cross-platform nature, but also the velocity of improvements that I get from services like Todoist or Gmail or Notion and that would be the second layer. And the third layer that I was going to say, from AI services. That has been the other change that has occurred for me over the past year. And I would say for work, the one LLM that really does it for me is Claude. As far as productivity is concerned, because of those integrations. Like Claude right now is the only major LLM that fully integrates with third-party apps, both on desktop, on macOS, obviously, and via the web. And those web integrations tie back into the web services that I use. So for example, my email and my task manager and my note-taking app, and they create that sort of sense of similarity between the iPad and the Mac, so that if I pick up one device and I pick up the iPad Pro and I got the Claude web app, because of the reasons that I mentioned, I got the Claude web app in my dock. But then I switch over to the MacBook Pro or the Mac Studio and I go to Claude.ai in my browser. I got all my projects, I got all my integrations, everything is going to be the same. And so yeah, I would say these three ideas of, but mostly revolving around shortcuts, web services, and AI, allows me to take advantage of each individual feature of the machine that I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
I love, the modularity of the iPad, the fact that I got a Magic Keyboard, and especially the small iPad Pro that I can, take it out of the keyboard, use it as a tablet. It's very comfortable to use. But then I also have that consistency, right? Those services they're going to have my data synced in the cloud, and they allow me to start working on one device, continue on the other, with the kind of AI integration that we're only just seeing kind of now with Apple Intelligence, but Apple is very much behind what you can do with AI in these apps.
I think it's interesting. In many ways, you are the ideal Apple customer. Like they always pitch this vision of like, I'm moving between my devices fluidly as my tasks change. And as, I want the pencil for this and I need a camera to scan that and put them all together on my Mac. Like you are living that life in a way that I think a lot of people actually, maybe they want to, but it doesn't really pan out. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't think I would ever be that kind of user. But the thing is, like, whenever I work on the Mac, and I get that sense that like I don't want to be stuck at my desk for too long. That is why I essentially only use the Mac Studio for AI experiments and recording the podcasts, because I gotta set up the lights and the camera here, so I gotta be in the office. But even when I'm using the MacBook Pro, there's always a part of me that sort of yearns for that flexibility of the iPad. And so I always thought I was always going to be all in on one device, right? It's either going to be the Mac or it's going to be the iPad. But increasingly over the past few months, I have appreciated the fact that I can have both, but I think I'm always going to love the iPad, because for now, at least, it's the only computer that can be a laptop, and it can also be a tablet with touch. Will that position ever change if Apple releases, I don't know, a MacBook with touch, or a MacBook where you can actually rip out the display and it's a tablet? I don't know. But for now, I I I guess I am the ideal Apple customer, but I sort of stumbled into it. It was not an intentional thing.
So I'm going to say something. I hope I don't make you mad at me, but I feel like this is a sign of maturity for you. Like, for the longest time, you would make these crazy workflows to do things
Yeah.
that were ridiculously simple on the Mac.
Yeah.
And I always felt like, well, that's cool that you can do that, but most people who want to do this stuff will just do that part on the Mac, and just focus on, what each platform is really good for. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
does that make sense? I hope you don't take that wrong. But
no, absolutely not. Because that is a great point, because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot over the past year. I feel like for a long time, this is gonna sound silly, but I'm just gonna be open about it. I feel like for the longest time, I wanted to prove a point. Not in the sense that all the content that I created, that all the things that I did, because I were just for like a show. I actually did work with the workflows, with the crazy workflows that I created for myself for years. Like, but I wanted to, I needed to see if it was possible, because I needed to know, like, how far can I take this? How and it always felt like there was like a mountain to climb, with the iPad.
Yeah, and it can be fun to climb mountains, right?
Yeah, and it can be fun, and it was very informative. Like, to be able to push the limits, to learn about the limitations of USB-C and Thunderbolt, and to find the perfect monitor and the perfect setup. Like, it kept me hungry and curious for years, right? Because it was always a challenge. And last December, when I published this article about, like, here's how I figured out how to record my podcasts and the videos on the iPad Pro, I felt like I got to the top of that mountain, and then I looked around and it was just me. And I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I realized, I guess I realized that there was nothing, there was nowhere else for me to go at that point in December 2024 or January 2025 with the iPad. And so that's how I realized, well, what am I going to do? There's nothing else happening. And I'm a curious person by nature. So that's when I started experimenting with large language models, but also it's when I realized, well, if I want to continue to be a tech writer, and I wanted to be a tech podcaster, it's time I take a look again at the Mac, because that's where a lot of things are happening these days. And then, of course, Apple announced iPadOS 26, and I think over the past month I've been thinking about this. Like, do I want to be the guy that is like, oh, forget about the Mac? I'm just gonna go all in on the iPad again. And believe me, like, that would totally work from a visibility perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's an easy narrative. It's an easy story. It's a comeback story. Everybody loves a comeback story. But I think I would rather try something else, which is something that I haven't done for the past decade, which is I can maybe be the kind of tech writer that can cover both the iPad and the Mac and the iPhone. And things are getting more and more, I guess, a change that we've witnessed, right, over the past few years in tech. Things are getting more fluid. Like, you got devices that can unfold, and from a phone you get a small tablet, and then you have glasses that have a desktop-like interface. Like, the boundaries of the form factor are changing. And I think that's going to happen with software too. So why limit myself to just be the iPad guy anymore? I did that for a decade, and it was great. And I mean, the iPad is always going to be my first love, so to speak. But I feel like I need to satisfy my curiosity in a different way if I want to continue doing this for the next decade.
Yeah, and speaking selfishly, that makes you more interesting to me, right?
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Because I just like you, I use both platforms, and I'm always interested in good, effective ways to get my work done. And if I'm not watching the Federico stunt show, but instead something that is actually useful for me, I think you're going to find your audience really appreciates it. I think you'll find out.
I hope so. And it's always scary when when you create for yourself, like not an internet persona, but almost like an internet role. Like you.
That's like your identity, the
For
iPad
your
guy.
yes,
Yeah.
for your audience, you fit into one specific bucket, and people start following you because of that. They sign up because of that. They listen to your podcast. Maybe they even give you money if you have a membership program. And so on. Not to get all meta about this discussion about creating content, but you reach a point where like you feel like your career is hangs in this balance of the things I want to do versus the things that people expect from me that I'm supposed to do, right? And it was hard to navigate and to those waters for the past decade. And whenever I had something to say about the Mac, I would get the guy on Twitter or now on Mastodon me like, shut up, you go back to the iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And so buckets are great when you have a good time inside of it, and when there's still when it's a big bucket and you got tons to do inside it. But there's that it's a double-edged sword, right? Because especially now that fundamentally I think the tech landscape is changing, we're gonna see things from Apple over the next couple of years that maybe we wouldn't have expected 10 years ago. And so I think we gotta keep up with the times and be flexible, I guess is what I landed on as a realization, and that's what I'm gonna do.
You want me to make you feel better?
Yeah.
Most people, the vast majority of people are following you and listening to you, not because of the iPad, but because of your approach to solving problems with technology.
That's the hope.
It's true. It's true. I feel like I have experience with my own audience with this. You're going to find the same thing. People are looking for people that solve problems and help them learn how to solve problems, and you're very good at it. You're not going to have any problem. I guarantee it.
Thank you, David.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Ecamm. Get powerful live streaming for your Mac, and 1 month for free. Go to ecamm.com/MPU. If you're looking to get into video, you need Ecamm. Ecamm Live is the leading video production and live streaming studio built just for the Mac. It's great for streaming, recording, podcasting, and presenting. If you want to stand out from the crowd, you need high-quality video. And with Ecamm, you can screen share, use multiple cameras, and even direct the show in real time with their live camera switcher. It's great for simplifying your workflow, too, because you can do everything just with the Ecamm app. Get started quickly and have everything on hand to create whatever you need with video. It really is the production pipeline when you're heading out to YouTube, Zoom, Twitch, or whatever. You don't need to go buy a bunch of expensive software. Using Ecamm, you can get everything you need for multiple cameras, screen sharing, and even a live camera switcher. I've heard from Mac Power users that are using this in their business and they love it. Another great thing about Ecamm is you can add your own stamp to your videos with logos, titles, lower thirds, and graphics. And you can drop in video clips, bring on interview guests, and even use a green screen. There's so much more. Ecamm Live really does it all. Ecamm's members are marketing professionals, podcasters, musicians, church leaders, bloggers, and content creators of all kinds. If you're on the pro level plan, you can even enjoy it with Zoom. With Ecamm for Zoom, you can automatically send Ecamm Live's audio and video output into a Zoom meeting, Zoom webinar, or Zoom event, and add up to 8 Zoom participants as camera sources in your broadcast or recording. Plus, you can automatically create individual participant audio and video recordings and add Zoom chat messages to your broadcast or recording as text overlays. To get 1 month free today, just go to ecamm.com/MPU and use the code MPU. That's a whole month free of Ecamm Live at ecamm.com/MPU with the code MPU. Go there now and check it out. And our thanks to Ecamm for their support of the Mac Power Users and Relay.
We just finished saying that you're not the iPad guy, but we're going to talk about iPads next.
I mean, we have to, yes.
We've got to. You are in between iPads at the moment.
Yeah. I installed iPadOS 26 both on my 11-inch iPad Pro and the 13-inch iPad Pro, because as the iPad guy, I'm supposed to have both. And also, I put it on the iPad Mini. Now, I'm not going to use the iPad Mini for work, although that was another thing that I did many years ago. And iPadOS 26 on the iPad Mini, it's like its own beast. It's its own completely separate thing. But I've been trying to decide which flavor of iPadOS 26 do I like better, the one on the 11-inch or the one on the 13-inch. And my struggle right now, because I still haven't decided, my struggle is that the multitasking and the windowing feels better on the big iPad Pro, right? Because you got a bigger screen and everything is more comfortable. You can make the windows bigger. You can see more overlapping windows at the same time. When you pop down the menu bar and you navigate menus, they obscure less of the UI that you're looking at underneath the menu bar and the menus. So it's bigger. It's more comfortable. We know this about multitasking and windowing. The bigger screen, usually the more comfortable it is. But the 13-inch iPad Pro lends itself less to the kind of usage as a tablet, right? The 11-inch iPad Pro is more flexible like that, because when you can put the 11-inch. I have the 11-inch on my desk right now. It's in the Magic Keyboard, but then when you take it out of the Magic Keyboard and you use it as a tablet, it's got that better balance. It's got a more comfortable size. You can hold it in landscape without feeling like you're holding a tray table and you're bringing breakfast to somebody, like it is with the 13-inch iPad Pro. It feels more like a tablet instead of a giant screen in your hands. And I've realized about myself, I've noticed about myself that the 11-inch is the more well-rounded option, right? You can go from a pretty comfortable laptop. It's a small laptop, kind of reminiscent of the old 11-inch MacBook Air. If you guys remember, I'm sure Steve remembers that.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of reminiscent of that. And then, of course, you can hook it up to an external display and everything. But then when you detach it from the Magic Keyboard, you get a pretty comfortable tablet. And so I am torn because there is really no perfect option, right? It's a matter. Let me rephrase. The perfect option would be a tablet that could fold, so that could be small or big if you wanted to, but that's not going to be a product.
Well, it's rumored, but it's years away.
It's rumored, but it's years away. So for now, there is no perfect option. I guess it comes down to, and I will make a decision at some point, because I don't want to obviously lug around or manage 2 iPads on a weekly basis, but I will make a decision. Do I, and the moment that I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that there's going to be an event on the horizon that will change this decision once again. Because I was going to say, I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to decide, do I prefer this tablet to be modular, to be, in the Magic Keyboard or in my hands, or do I prefer it to just be a laptop? But as I thought that, I realized what's going to happen in September 2026 when Apple is going to come out with a phone that unfolds into a small tablet, right? Because my usage of the iPad Pro as a tablet is mostly at night or when I'm sort of chilling on the couch and I want to read something or watch a YouTube video. That's when I take my iPad Pro out of the Magic Keyboard and I put it in my lap or hold it in my hands and I read an article or watch a video or just, do something that is non-typing related. But next year, most likely, I will have a phone that when it's not in my pocket, I can fold open, and it's what? An iPad mini, right?
iPad mini-ish.
What's that gonna do to this setup? Should I maybe get used to the 13-inch iPad Pro because I'm gonna have an iPhone Fold next year? I don't know. We'll see. I am honestly gravitating, I use the 11-inch and I think, oh, this is great. And then I switch back to the bigger one and I think, oh, this is also great. So I don't know right now, honestly.
I think for most people, it really depends on how much do you own a laptop and do you use it often, right? And I feel like if you're somebody who regularly sits behind even just a MacBook Air, then I think the natural answer is the 11-inch. And if you're somebody who wants it as a laptop, then get the 13-inch.
Yeah.
But you're kind of an edge case, right? Because you are the iPad guy.
Yeah, I mean, it also doesn't help that right now I need to test iPadOS 26 extensively for my review, right? So there's also that. Like most people don't do that. Most people just have an iPad, and when there's the public beta, or maybe in September, they just put in the new software.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, these experiments are also because of the review, right? What I have seen is that obviously this is not a problem when I want to work with iPadOS at my desk, because the moment that I connect my iPad to my external monitor, the monitor is always going to be the same size. So no matter if I'm using the 11 or the 13, both are just as capable. Both of them have an M4, and so it doesn't really matter when I'm at my desk. It only matters when I'm either not at home, or when I want to work outside, or when I want to work on the couch or in the living room or something. So I don't know. I also put Tahoe on my MacBook Pro because of, I want to see what the new design is like. So that's what I meant by I'm in between computers.
So let's say I go over and visit you in Italy,
Yeah.
and I say, hey, let's go take like a 3-day trip down to Rome or wherever, right? And what do you bring? Do you bring your MacBook, or do you bring an iPad? Do you bring what device do you bring on a 3 or 4 day trip?
Like I think right now I would take the 13-inch iPad Pro.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Steven? Which one would you bring?
My 14-inch MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
Or, I do have that MacBook Air.
Steven, you're very consistent. You're very consistent.
It's a great laptop. It's so good. Yeah. No, I think it's just all super interesting. And Federico, as long as I've known you, you are always willing to question where you've been.
Yeah.
And I think that's really compelling to our previous topic. And, we're seeing that, I think, even a little bit in iPadOS 26, right? Some really like core fundamental things to the iPad are different now. Yeah, you can still use it as like one app at a time. It's just, which is great for a tons of users and great on the iPad mini. But for people who want real windowing, it's taken them a long time, but they're here now. And I think that takes, I'm sure that took a lot of debate within Apple, but I'm glad that they're finally in a place where they're willing to kind of break from the past of this device and push it forward. Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see, I think, if third-party developers will sort of react to that, with new apps or updates to their existing iPad apps. Like, will an operating system update that has major changes to multitasking and windowing, will that be enough to sort of to swing the pendulum back, right? To convince developers that, hey, maybe I should invest in the iPad platform for my app again, or will it just be, that's fine, but I really don't feel like I have the resources as a developer to push forward the iPad version of my app? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think right now it's great, compared to what it used to be. And I know that some people don't like the removal of slide over and split view. It'll be interesting to see if maybe Apple, I don't know, sort of brings back that modality. I have no idea.
Well, I think that's a separate question, that a challenge for Apple right now as well. I mean, we all have developer friends that used to make great apps for mobile who are now building web-based AI services, right? And developers are going where the money and the excitement is.
Yeah.
And that is not as much proprietary hardware anymore. It's not even a knock against Apple. They're not doing it for Google hardware either. There's a new shiny thing out there, and I think it's going to be a real challenge, honestly, getting real quality proprietary apps.
I think it's absolutely the case, and I think, you see what's happening with web services and web-based automations and integrations, and it's clear that the tech industry is largely moving in that direction. and I know that it makes a lot of people uneasy. It made me uneasy, still kind of makes me uneasy, but I'll always also be the kind of person that, like, I don't want to become an old guy stuck in
Sure.
my ways saying, oh no, things were better when we were all using native apps and there was no AI. Like, I don't have the power to change the world. I still fundamentally love technology, and tinkering with it and playing around with it. And I think computers are cool. And maybe that sounds like a stupid thing to say, but I still have so much fun trying new stuff and getting the computer to do things for me. And so I don't know where I'm going with this. Just that I'm gonna have a problem the moment I'm gonna resist change at a fundamental level as a person. And that hasn't happened in the 16 years that I've been doing this, and hopefully it won't happen for another 16.
Well, I mean, AI is so interesting, right? Because there's big questions like, can we align it with human interests as it gets smarter? I mean, there's like scary stuff about AI out there,
Yeah.
but as kind of like a ground level automator, as a person who's just not a coder but wants my computer to do stuff for me, I'm getting more help now than I ever have. And AI is so useful for all sorts of dumb little things that used to take me a lot of time, that it's also kind of exciting right now, So I get it. I get it, man. But iOS 26, you've been talking for years about what they need to do to improve it. I feel like you're one of the leading voices in this. Obviously, there's still some sharp edges if you compare iPadOS to macOS, but there's also some things that iPadOS is better at than macOS is. I mean, do you feel like the balance is struck now? Are you happy generally with where it is?
Like with the design language across platforms?
Well, more, I was thinking functionality. Like, is the windowing good enough? Is the multitasking strong enough? I mean, can most people now get their work done on a computer? Does that, is it a computer ad now work?
I think the answer is yes. I think for most people, the fact that you can open, even more than 10 windows and you got a better file manager, and you can use an external monitor, you can use external accessories, and you can record yourself even if you would just want to do a podcast. And the AirPods, for example, record better audio now. Like, I think you can make the case for the iPad as a laptop replacement that is much better now with iPadOS 26 than it was until last year with iPadOS 18. There's always going to be that issue, I think, with highly specialized folks or people who maybe need to use a particular piece of software because maybe they're college students or maybe they're, I don't know, lawyers or doctors and need to use a particular software that is desktop only. And so they, and I talk to these people, like, and I'm having this conversation with some of my neighbors, for example, and they're like, I really want to use an iPad, but the software that I got to use at work is only on Google Chrome, right? And so that's why they end up buying either a Windows PC or a MacBook Pro. And so there's nothing we can do about that. It's that kind of issue. I feel like if you're stuck in that sort of problem, you should just use a laptop. And you should just use a desktop operating system, right? But I think the answer to your question is yes. I think iPadOS 26 makes the iPad a better computer for, is it the majority of people? I want to say yes. Like, I think the vast majority of people can get by with the iPad version of Safari and opening 10 windows at once and going back to full screen and having a pretty basic menu bar, even without third-party menu bar apps, and with sandboxing, arguably even without a clipboard manager. I think the majority of people can get by with that sort of laptop. Obviously, the people who are listening to this podcast and the people who read MacStories or 512, they know they want more. They know they deserve more, right? So, but I'm trying to think, like, is it okay for the college student? I think yes. I think, with iPadOS 26 and an Apple Pencil and a Magic Keyboard, you get yourself a pretty great computer, honestly. So yeah. I think for most people, yes.
I think you're right. I mean, I think that earlier question I asked about you're going to go on a 3 or 4 day trip. Once iPadOS 26 is on everybody's iPad, I think there'll be a lot of people who could elect to bring an iPad and have no problem. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's wrong to like get hung up on like, yeah, but I can't run my terminal commands, blah blah. Well, of course, you're never going to do that on an iPad, and that's okay. If that's what you're hung up on, then just use a Mac. But I think for a lot of people, I really feel like the balance, and I don't want to. I know you're working on your review, so you're probably still developing your thoughts around it. But I can say personally, having used this beta, that I feel like they got the mix right, and I think a lot of people are going to really love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And my hot take, I guess, right now is that Apple did a better job with iPadOS 26 than they did with iOS 26. So I think right now is the more exciting of the two, and the more I don't know, that has like a coherent vision, I think, right now.
Well, that's kind of nice because usually it's the opposite. So
Usually, right? Yeah. It's different, and it feels nice. Like, oh yeah, the iPad people, they actually got their act together this year. It's nice.
Yeah.
Or I mean, I think maybe a better way to say is they got the resources and the attention. Because I feel like there's a lot of people that would always want to make it better, but there's only so many hours, and whoever's in charge said, okay, this year the iPad gets the hours.
If you love Mac Power users and want even more, check out our membership. There's a link in the show notes to More Power Users. So what is this? More Power Users is a longer ad-free version of the show that we do each and every week. Very often, if we have a guest or a topic, there's conversation we don't get to in the main show, and More Power Users is a great place to have those conversations that otherwise would be lost forever. You also get a bunch of cool perks from Relay, the podcast network that we're on. So you have access to a couple of members-only podcasts, a newsletter, a Discord server, and a whole lot more. So go to relay.fm/MPU/join to learn more, or check out the link in the show notes.
Federico, this is where I want to just kind of get nerdy with you for a minute, because you're doing cool stuff with AI and automation, and I feel like a kindred spirit with you. I love that you're working on this stuff. I feel like as users, especially people who are not developers, the AI as it currently exists gives us opportunities that were just never available to us before.
Mm-hmm.
And I know personally, I've talked on this show about some of the ones I've developed, and you've come up with some cool ones too. And just like, it feels to me like suddenly a glass ceiling over my head over how much I could automate without like diving into Xcode has been shattered. And I think you feel the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like over the past 7 months, I have created so many shortcuts and so many things. And it almost feels like unlimited creativity in a way, in the sense that like people, whenever you talk about AI and whenever you talk about generative AI, there's always the concern of generative AI replacing human input and human creativity. And that is why I still personally honestly find generative image creation kind of gross.
Yeah.
And I don't use it, and I'm not interested in it. It just doesn't resonate with me. I just don't get, why would you enjoy a video made by AI instead of a film made by people? Or why would you say, oh, look at this beautiful photo made by AI? Like, I don't get it. I think, and it took me a while. It took me a while, honestly, to come to terms with this idea of like, I like AI as a tool, as an instrument, as a thing that I get to program myself with natural language, and that's what I do, really. And I think, David, to your point, like the ceiling that was shattered for me, that was essentially a couple of things. The first one is just plain natural language processing. That's what LLMs do, like understanding something, a non-deterministic input, which is human language. Like for many years, I've been creating workflows and then shortcuts with rigid rules and structures and conditional blocks. And you know the deal. I mean, going top to bottom, you got your actions, you got your variables, and that's what the shortcut does. But whenever you had to deal with natural language, with language that maybe couldn't be scripted with regular expressions or couldn't be processed with JavaScript or something behind the scenes, it was non-automatable at all. And so LLMs deal with that. With, obviously different LLMs have different capabilities, but more or less, they all do a pretty good job at dealing with the non-deterministic nature of human language and text, that you copy and paste from an email or a document. And the second thing is large context windows. Being able to find information across a huge document, or being able to find patterns across millions of words. Like that's something that this new generation, especially the latest models, can do pretty consistently, pretty reliably, and quickly. That just was impossible years ago, right? And so when you factor in these two characteristics of LLMs with the latest trend of tool calling or tool usage, like the idea that your LLM can now call up a third-party web service or a third-party app or a little terminal or a little browser window or web search, whatever the tool may be. But in addition to generating the text, it can also use features from external tools. Those tools can even be shortcuts on the Mac if you're using the right apps. But that makes it very fascinating for me because it basically turns what most people think of as a chatbot. It makes it a powerful instrument that I get to sort of mold to whatever shape I want it to have, and that I can fit in pretty much all kinds of workflows that I used to have. In fact, most of the shortcuts that I've built over the past several months, they're not necessarily new AI shortcuts or workflows. They are old ideas that I was able to take to their, I guess, logical conclusion by having this additional layer on top, which is processing text and dealing with a lot of text in a way that a shortcut with 50 conditional blocks inside or 20 different flavors of the same regular expression really never could.
And that's where you hit the magic point. It's processing, not generating.
Yes,
people
it's processing.
Get hung up. They're like, oh yeah, LLM, it writes for you. I don't need it to write for me. No, we want to process. Like I've got a document here, and I want to find, what is the color of the widget that was ordered. Just review the document. Tell me what color they ordered, and they'll say, oh yeah, they ordered the green one. You know how hard that would have been to do before AI, if at all possible. Short of, I don't know how I would have done it, but But now it's like a simple command to an LLM, and it's 100% accurate, and it processes. And that, I think that's where people need to get their head past. You can process things now that you never could through automation, which means you can have this stuff done automatically. Find out what color the widget was, add it to a spreadsheet, send an email to the manufacturing company saying we need more of that color. All that stuff. Now, anybody listening to my voice could create that with just a little bit of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I am not interested in the generation aspect whatsoever. I do not use the image generation. If anything, I think I've used it in Apple Intelligence just to troll my friends like Steven, sending him really bad pictures made with Apple Intelligence. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
And on the generation front, even with words, I don't really find it that useful. I think it's not very good as a writer. I think eventually it will get better than me, but I still want to be the person writing. But something I would do on generation that I think is helpful is I have it ask me reflective questions on things I write.
Mm-hmm.
And often it asks questions that a reader would ask. And that allows me to go back and fix it. So you can even use it as part of generation. But for the automation stuff, I feel like it's the processing That's the real key. Now, will you please make the case for Claude? Because you talked earlier. You
Yeah.
said this is the one. Why is it? And I suspect you're going to be talking about MCP, but I also
Yes.
suspect a lot of our listeners have no idea what that is. So
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
back up a little bit, explain what it is and why people should be trying Claude for this.
Sure. So obviously, as with many things in AI, maybe the moment this episode comes out, what I'm about to say will already be outdated. But at this moment in time, as we're recording this, I gravitate toward Claude for work, for productivity tasks, because it integrates better and more than ChatGPT or Google Gemini or local AI models. It integrates more and better with the other apps that I use on a daily basis. And that is possible thanks to really three things. One is the built-in connectors that Claude and Anthropic, the company behind Claude, has released. They have built-in integrations for your Google Drive and Gmail, Google Calendar, and GitHub, I think. Then they have desktop extensions and remote extensions or remote servers. The desktop and remote extensions, they're both based on MCP. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It was a technology that Anthropic, so the makers of Claude, invented MCP and open sourced it toward the end of the last year of 2024. And it really took off. And it's been adopted right now by the rest of the AI industry. And essentially, it's been described as like USB-C for web services. It's basically a standard format for letting large language models, so Claude, Google Gemini, ChatGPT eventually maybe, integrate with external sources. So that can be your task manager, like Todoist in the cloud, or it can be your email client, or it can be, the terminal on macOS. It can be the Shortcuts app on macOS. They're all really based on the same spec, roughly speaking. And the idea is you authorize that, you got permissions that you can set on a granular basis if you want to, and you can give the large language model certain levels of access to whatever app integrates with MCP. And why is that important? That's important because it allows you to bridge the capabilities of the LLM that we just spoke about. So being able to have a long conversation, being able to understand text with the more rigid structure of a third-party app. That sort of MCP, for example, allows you to do things like, hey, can you look into my task manager and find the tasks that are related to my trip to Greece and delay them by 3 days? That is like in theory, that is the dream of Apple Intelligence and Shortcuts and Siri. And it's actually available right now if you use MCP and, Todoist. It allows you to combine the best of both worlds of natural language understanding with effectively API integrations, right? So I use that a lot myself. My favorite MCP integration is the Zapier one. Zapier is a web automation service, and it basically acts as the glue between Claude and whatever app is compatible with Zapier. You can just make it show up in Claude thanks to Zapier in the middle. I connected my Notion, my Spotify, iKnowReader, like every single web service that is compatible with Zapier is also going to be compatible with Claude. And so if I take a look at, one of the other things that Claude does a good job at is letting you organize your conversations in projects. These are basically folders that have a common set of instructions. So for example, I got my, my morning brief project, which is a thing that I can run every morning, and it connects to my Gmail, to my Todoist, and to my Google Calendar, and to my Notion. So 4 things at once. And it just gives me in a minute or two, it prints out a summary of okay, here's what's on track for today. And it's all done in natural language. And I got another that is before I send my articles to my human editor, shout out to Devon, because I still care about having an actual person looking at my stuff and saying, hey, look, this sentence doesn't make sense. Like maybe you should expand upon this topic or this idea. But I still like to make sure that I send him a draft in a pretty good shape. And so I got my proofreading project. And that integrates with, there's a PDF for the Apple Style Guide that is used as a reference for product names. And there's a bunch of instructions, and Claude can make sure that, like, okay, you got a typo here, you got another typo there. And so that allows me to have a better first draft for my editor than I used to. And then I can do like even crazier things. Like, for example, one that I put together over the past month, because I am in review preparation mode. One of the things that I started struggling with a few years ago was remembering when certain iOS features launched in which version of iOS. And especially once you've been writing reviews for 10 years, the details get kind of hazy. Like, was dark mode in 13 or 14? It was 13. Like, when was it that, I don't know, widgets became interactive? Like, there's all this historical information, and especially the details that when I'm writing and I'm referencing something, I'm like, oh, wait, when was that? So what I put together, thanks to Zapier and Claude, is an iOS review search project where actually Claude, in this case, needs a little help from Google Gemini. So I built myself a project where Claude asks the first question to Gemini, because Gemini has a bigger context window. Gemini can hold in its context my entire archive of 10 iOS reviews. That is almost 1 million tokens when you translate between words and tokens. So it's right there. My current archive from iOS 9 to iOS 18 is right below the limit of Google Gemini, which is 1 million tokens.
Now, is that using Gemini or Notebook?
That is using Gemini, straight up Gemini. So Claude, so I'm going to ask, when did something totally random, like when did stocks get Apple News integration? That was a real thing that Apple did in iOS 12. And in Claude, it's not going to be able to search my entire archive of iOS reviews. So I created a Zapier tool to send that question from Claude to Gemini. Gemini is going to search. It's going to find the exact answer in my archive of iOS reviews, and it's going to pass back some JSON content to Claude. That would be the result and some metadata, like this is the result. These are some quotes from that section of the review. This is the page of the review, like metadata. Claude is going to come back, take that metadata from Gemini and double check it. It's going to take that, and it's going to search the web, it's going to land on MacStories, verify that the quote is there, that it belongs to the right review, and after a minute or two, it's going to say, thanks to Gemini, I have also confirmed that stocks got its Apple News integration in iOS 12, and here's what you said at the time. So that's the kind of thing that I can do with AI. That shortcut, that entire workflow would have been impossible without natural language understanding, large context windows, and MCP. So that's the kind of thing that I do.
And just so folks know, Notion has stated their support for MCP as well as Gemini. I mean, interestingly, we didn't have every provider say we're going to come up with our own interactive system, and it's going to be a battle of these ideas. They've all agreed to MCP, and they're all going to get it eventually. But right now, Claude is the leader, and Claude is the people who came up with it. I would also add, I just generally prefer the responses I get from Claude. I think
it's gotta. I agree. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the training. Maybe it's the fact. I don't know. I think it's got a slightly nicer style, if you can call it a style.
My general impression is ChatGPT has more varied tools and abilities, but in terms of just interacting with it, I prefer Claude's responses.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, Federico, because I think a lot of people, when they think about AI tools, they think about the very things that you sort of push back against, like the generation,
Yeah,
the things that I would say endanger human creativity. But
yeah,
the reality is, like, your iOS reviews are the perfect example of this. Like, you have a wealth of information that you generated, right? That's your blood, sweat, and tears into that work. And you're using AI to surface your work to yourself. And I think that's fascinating. And I think you see a lot of use for that within companies, within organizations, right? Thinking about MacStories is a small team, but imagine you were a big company and you had all of your corporate information in a system like this, and you could cross-check and verify and do all these things. I remember years ago, probably 12 years ago, I worked on this project for a chemical company here in town, and they had all these like safety data sheets. And so if you were a technician in the field and you came across, this certain type of machine with a certain type of chemical in it, you knew, you know, sort of the stats on it and information about it. And this sort of thing would have been so useful to them, right? We basically built a tool where they could upload all the PDFs and a bunch of metadata, and then it searched it, right? It was really kind of dumb, but that was the best you could do 12 years ago, right? And now think about applying these sort of large language models and these tools to your own information, your own set of data. A company like that can make their field technicians more efficient and probably safer because it can search across this data. And now you got to trust it and verify and do all those things. But that angle to it of what it is possible, I think is I'm on the same page as you, much more interesting than putting a graphic designer out of work with something
yeah,
that doesn't look very good. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I feel like the generative features, like, here's the thing, like, and maybe this is an ugly truth to say. Unfortunately, from my perspective, a lot of people in everyday life don't care about the importance of human creativity. And I say that as a creator myself. A lot of people, and not because they're bad people, I'm not saying that. They just, it's not a priority for them. And try and have this conversation about the sanctity of human creativity when you're working, your job absolutely exhausts you, and then you go back home and you got your kids and you got your mortgage to pay, and it's 9 p.m. and you just want to go to bed, and you got to wake up the next morning, and you got somebody up on Twitter or Threads, all up and mighty, telling you, oh, but you're not supposed to use ChatGPT for images because it's bad for human creativity. And you're like, dude, I'm just so exhausted, I don't even know, I just wanted to have fun with an image, right? So you got to relate with that perspective that a lot of folks just don't care about the danger of these services for human creativity. And here's the thing, I don't think we should make them feel so bad either, because we think about this stuff, we're creators, obviously we have our opinions about, like, yes, image generation is bad, yes, video generation is bad, yes, text generation is bad, but not everybody is a creator. And not everybody should care about this problem. And maybe this is an unpopular opinion to have, but like, try and say that again to the single mom or to the person working 2 jobs, and just wants to go to ChatGPT and make a stupid meme and post it on Instagram. Like, and you, an intellectual, are like, oh no, but actually, do you know that that's bad for bloggers? Like, I get it why people do it, because it's fun, it's free, and everybody's doing it. And am I saying that it's a good thing? No, but I'm also saying that I don't want to be the guy on social media and being like, no, don't do it, because do you know that's bad? Like, I am instead just choosing myself to ignore it, to not use it, to not recommend it with whatever platform I may have with my site and my podcasts. And I'm going to try and teach people how we can use these things with for productivity purposes, so that we can keep our jobs and hopefully be more efficient and hopefully be faster. And I don't know, impress our boss, or get a promotion or something. I don't know, and essentially make the best out of a questionable situation. Does that make sense? I don't know. I hope it does.
Difficult times, man. Difficult questions.
Yeah.
Federico, we always like to end the show sharing a few of your favorite apps and services. I'm always curious to hear what you're using lately. What are some apps and services that are blowing your hair back these days?
Ooh, okay. So I want to give a shout out to we're going to talk about Notion after. So Nautomate. That's a shortcuts utility just for Notion actions. And so you don't have it's available on iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. Instead of learning the very complex Notion API, you can just make your own shortcuts for Notion using the built-in actions by Nautomate. So I believe that was created by the late Alex Hay, and was a sort of the development was taken over by Snailed It, right? By the team where Rosemary's also working on this now.
They took over all of Alex's apps, and they're updating them. It's real good to see that. And if you want to use shortcuts in Notion, Nautomate is the one.
Yeah. I also want to mention Jump Desktop. This is a remote desktop utility that I'm using on the Mac Studio. I also want to set it up on my gaming PC. I'm using just desktop instead of Screens. I know that Screens by Adobe, excellent app. It's very popular in our community, but I prefer Jump Desktop because it doesn't let me use the VNC protocol. It lets me use RDP instead. And RDP has much, much better quality and performance than VNC when you want to log into another computer on your network or outside of your network.
That one's been around a long time. I mean, back in the old days when I had to remote into my work PC, Jump Desktop was always the one that worked.
Yeah.
Not the best UI, but also the whole point is that you hide the UI and then you just use the remote computer. So,
And it's free for personal use, which is cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Then I'll mention, I guess, Superhuman for email. I am not into the Superhuman cult, whatever. I just like the fact that it's very fast. Like the interactions, the keyboard shortcuts, the keyboard navigation is very quick. The AI is pretty decent. Not as good as Shortwave. If you're looking for an AI capable email client, the AI is all right. I just like the UI of Shortwave of Superhuman a little better. I think it's cleaner. I like the tab-based organization. I think it's very quick, especially on macOS. You can fly through emails with a keyboard once you learn all of the keyboard shortcuts. And my one very particular reason for using Superhuman instead of other email.
Let me guess. Wait, before you tell me. Is it links?
Okay. It's links.
Yes.
Specifically, it's the fact that Superhuman keeps the same IDs of individual messages. It keeps the same Gmail IDs. That, to go back to Claude, that allows me to script my email inbox with Claude. Claude is able to extract the unique identifier of an email message. And thanks to the magic of URL schemes, I can use Claude to put together Superhuman deep links that will work because Superhuman keeps the Gmail IDs of every single message, unlike Shortwave, which rolls its own IDs for messages. And I can tell you that MindStream is the same. Keeps the native Gmail IDs for messages, but MindStream is Mac only. And Notion Mail, which is now available on Mac and the web, I think it's launching at some point in the future on iOS. Notion Mail will also be an option because Notion Mail keeps the Gmail IDs when you deep link to a message in the app. So for now, I'm using Superhuman. Things may change if Notion Mail is good on iOS or if MindStream ever shows up on iOS.
Yeah, I guess I don't think I'm a cult member for Superhuman, but I'm definitely a fan because it has just really transformed the speed at which I can process email. And the links have been just rock solid for me.
Yeah.
You can put them anywhere and you'll get back to them. All right. Well, thank you so much, Federico, for bringing us up to date.
Thank you.
I love to hear how things are going. During the WWDC announcement, they're saying iOS 26, and I knew we had already booked you for this. I'm like, oh, that show's going to get interesting now.
Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Where should people go to keep up with you?
MacStories.net is really the best place. And these days I tend to split my social media presence in between Mastodon and Blue Sky, and I go back and forth between the two. There's weeks where I like Mastodon better. There's weeks where I like Blue Sky better. Maybe both places are the best option.
All right. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us at relay.fm/MPU. If you go there, you can sign up for More Power Users, which is the ad-free extended version of the show. We'd love to have you join. Thank you to our sponsors this week, 1Password and Ecamm. On the More Power Users episode, we're going to be talking to Viticci about Notion. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.